Okay, so I just wanted to make a quick little video on this. So I was playing my Mesa Boogie Lone Star this morning. I turned it on. I don't use it all that often, but it's got this huge clean tone that basically just fills up the room. And I instantly text a mate and just said, you know, two mates actually, this amp is nuts. And so I don't know whether it's obvious from the channel or not, like I do have a definite interest in modelling, and this video was just basically explaining why it is that I use modelers, and giving sort of my reasons for that. Now, I'm a massive fan of tube amps, and I don't think there's really anyone who works at these kind of companies that aren't a big fan of tube amps. I know that Ben Adrian, for instance, who's one of the head engineers, I think, or one of the DSP engineers, has a history in tube amps. I'm not sure about who works at Cortex, and I know that Cliff at Fractal, you know, has a massive collection of tube amps. And I don't think it's just because they're trying to sort of put tube amps or amp companies out of business. I think it's because they have a genuine interest in trying to get close to the magic that some of these amps that some of us are lucky to have. Or, you know, I've never played a Plexi in real life. I've never played a Fender Deluxe Reverb in real life. I think I've played a Fender Twin in real life, but you know, there's loads of stuff that is in these modelers that I've never really got my hands on. And I think that's kind of one of the things that's cool for me about modelling, is that there's a lot of variety in most of these, and it gives you the opportunity to experiment with tones that you wouldn't get in real life without buying a lot of gear. So this, for instance, I've done gigs with just one of these, The space factor is huge for me as well, so if I'm on like a dodgy wedding gig and if I've got to carry a PA and monitors for the rest of the band and stuff, I'll just take a tiny pedal board with that on it, and that can do my tones, and I've got to use kind of direct tones anyway for a lot of the gigs that I'm doing, so that's super convenient. So for me, modelling is convenient for gigging in a lot of ways. I have said before, and I say to friends as well, if I want to have fun on a gig though, I will take a real amp. I think for some reason it's just a bit more fun, and potentially it sounds better to you when you're on stage and stuff like that, if you're able to turn the volume up to a level where you can hear yourself, and the way that it kind of kicks at the back of your trousers or whatever. I do think that's a way more enjoyable experience than going direct. However, if you don't have much stage volume and you've got in-ears, to me it doesn't really make much difference what I'm playing to at that point. Generally things just don't feel or sound great in in-ear monitors for me. That's been my general experience of the thing. The other thing that's convenient about these is that I can play them at pretty much any time of the day, and I don't live in a massive house in the middle of nowhere. I live in a attached house, you know, in like an estate, and so for me I can't really crank my tube amps, and you know, if I wanted to get drive out of some of my amps or whatever, like the California Tweed or the Electrodyne, things start to get quite loud, so recording at home with a real amp is not always ideal. The other thing is that mic placement for me is a real dark art, so you can not really realise when you're in a small room like this where you're not separate from the room where the amp is, you can't really get a great idea of how the mic'd signal is actually sounding without spending time stopping playing and going and listening back to what's being recorded. And for me that kind of slows down the process in a way that I just want to come and play guitar and know that it's going to sound reliably how I expect it to sound. So I just get up in the morning and I start recording, and I know that if I pick up the HX Stomp or whatever, I can pull up one of the tones that I created weeks ago and it's going to sound how I expected it to sound. And I can also come out of it and DI that signal so that if anything drastic does happen and the take was still good but the tone, you know, maybe was one way or another, I can still make changes to that and save a take potentially depending on how I'm recording it. With a real amp I'm not able to do that because I don't have a reamp box, so it's a bit different in that way. So there's no real grand conspiracy to any of this stuff. It's not like any of these companies are paying me to do this stuff with modelers. It's just I actually have a genuine interest in modelers since I was, I think, 17 or so. I first got a Line 6 Pod XT Live, I think it was. So my first proper decent tube amp was a Mesa Boogie Nomad 45, which I've still got. Before I had that, I had a modeler, and so I've been used to recording with modelers for that whole time. And I've grown up playing modelers and learning to try and get decent tones out of them. I honestly don't have an issue using a modeler over a real amp. I think generally for me recording, that would be the way that I would go, particularly if I'm not in like a situation where there's an engineer and all that sort of stuff, which is most of the time for me, let's be honest. The other thing is that I think there's an interest in people who are able to use modelers and get sort of tones out of them in a way that there's not the same interest for tube amps. So if I upload a video with one of my Mesa Boogie amps, generally it won't do as well as if I'd done something similar on an HX Stomp or a Helix or a Quad Cortex or whatever. So for me there's also that. I think that's partly why people are arriving at the channel, because they want to hear how some of this gear sounds, because I think, like me, they have the same needs. So a lot of us can't necessarily crank a plexi at home. I think a lot of us potentially have to work around actual jobs and stuff, and so generally if you're going to be trying to do some recording or playing guitar, you're going to have to work around different kinds of hours, and you're going to have to potentially be quiet whilst other people are sleeping in the house, and potentially you're not going to have time to set up a microphone and try and get all of that stuff together. So it's no grand conspiracy for me. I do think some tube amps, in particular the ones that I own, are more fun than modelling, but they are limited in some ways, obviously. And with something like this I could do looping and freezing all in one tiny unit, whereas that requires an amp, a pedal board, and even with all that stuff it's not necessarily as flexible as in the modelling world. So that's kind of my take on it, and why you personally see me using modelling very often on the channel. I do have real amps and I do really like them, It's just that modelling is also a huge interest for me and happens to be super convenient. What are your reasons for using modelling, and do you use modelling and real amps? I know there's got to be a bunch of people out there that love both, and like I say, I'm pretty sure that most of the people that work at these kind of companies also love the physical as well as the digital. I think that's generally the case. Thank you for stopping by, and hopefully that answers some of those questions that some people might have when they come to the channel. All of the playing in this video actually was done with an amp in silent mode. The first clip was playing through the Torpedo Captor X, which you can see in the background there. And then the second clip was playing through the quad Cortex capture of that signal chain that I was using. I think if you can get something usable out of a modelling device, I think there are lots of reasons to like it. In particular, the convenience and the small size, as well as the things like, you know, channel switching and the ability to have different sounds that can get you through a gig. For me, I think that's the strength of modelling: the size, the convenience, and the variety of sounds, as well as being able to be quiet when you need to be quiet. That's my thoughts on that. Thanks for stopping by. If you want to like and subscribe, you could. There's plenty of other stuff on the channel. Mostly what I'm interested in is playing guitar, so that's mostly what I do here. Mostly.